I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. We're back after holidays. How'd you get on?
It was great. It was great to get away, and I got you're experiencing the back to school feeling. I haven't felt that since.
I'm kind of depressed.
Well, talking to me now surely will raise your spirits, but I haven't felt that since it's like remembering the Leaving Cert all them years ago.
Yeah,
where you all of a sudden reality strikes.
Yeah, I saw a big group of people doing yoga down along the seafront there the other night. That's real kind of, back in September. Lose a bit of weight.
Yeah.
Get rid of the summer.
Back to reality.
Flab and back to reality. So here we are.
Back to crime and misery to some extent.
Back to crime. Yeah. And it has, despite everybody taking summer holidays, of course, some of our friends have been busily keeping the SundayWorld.com busy.
Yes.
And many of our journalists have been working while we have been holidaying. Yes. But Patrick Irwin, a blast from the past in many ways, but he has been around. I've been writing about him since way back. 2008, 2009. Showing my age.
I suppose Patrick Irwin was one of these first big rural crime lords, really. Obviously, the history of organised crime has really been focused in Dublin and obviously to Limerick as well to some extent. But, as the explosion of drug culture around Ireland started to emerge in the 2000s, you had these kind of guys who had rural patches and, where before certain parts of Ireland you might have got an odd bit of hash for sale, all of a sudden these guys are selling coke and ecstasy and all that stuff and making big money. And Patrick Irwin was one of the first to really come to prominence. He was a major supplier of drugs in Sligo and the surrounding counties. He probably shot to attention more than anything because he'd forged ties with what was Eamon Dunn's the Don, as he was known, the Finglas-based criminal. Patrick Irwin had forged ties with that kind of gang. Also some other people that had been associated with sort of crime in West Dublin, and he really seemed to have found a little patch for himself and became probably one of the larger sort of regional suppliers in the country.
That's kind of curious to that time, if you look at it, where the rural groups, while they might be big in their own small hometown, once they start making the connections with those Dublin gangs, getting the supplies, sort of almost, becoming franchises nearly of them. And you see the explosion then of drugs sort of, I suppose, between 2003 into 2011 when he was jailed, for cocaine smuggling. But the area of Sligo and that northwest region became a very significant drug turf. The Irwins, at one point they controlled Sligo, Leitrim, Mayo, Roscommon and Donegal. But started out in a row with another gang in the area, a traveller gang from memory. And the gang was also once headed up by Patrick Irwin's brother, Hughie. But he survived an assassination bid and he kind of moved out to Lanzarote and based himself there. And at that point, Patrick, the younger brother, kind of took over. So what's happened? Bring us up to date with he's only recently out of prison and we have been keeping a watching brief on him. But
yeah, I suppose the Irwins became the number one gang in that area, but Patrick Irwin subsequently went to prison, and that a rival gang seems to have become one of the really taken over, and that gang is led by a man who we can't name, but they again forged very strong ties and connections with a Dublin criminal, in particular a Dublin criminal known as Mr. Big, and they seem to have taken over from the Irwins. So Patrick Irwin spent a long time in Castlereagh, where some of his associates were believed to control the drugs trade. But once he came out of prison, maybe his position had been undermined. And in 2019, he was given a Jim former Garda information message warning his life was under threat, and he survived a botched assassination attempt. Since then, he seems to have not been based in Sligo for the most part. He's moving between the north, Dublin, County Meath as well, we hear. Maybe the rival gang have really shot to prominence, and his position as unassailable in Sligo and that part of the country has dropped down. So we hadn't really heard much from him over the last, since COVID, since the assassination attempt. He definitely hadn't been in Sligo in the way he was, where he'd really been concentrating in an area and people were really, aware of, these were the big shots and stuff. But he popped up earlier this month. Not a bizarre incident maybe, but he seems to have a colourful incident, put it that way. Obviously there's a victim of this as well, but he's been he seems to have developed a grudge against a particular legal professional, let's put it that way. The grudge seems to have been over a period of time. He seems to have been demanding money that he believed he is owed. Now, there's no suggestion this legal professional could
owe a criminal money.
No, or has behaved in any way inappropriately. But this is the way these guys are, and I mean you see it constantly. People deciding somebody owes them a debt and then proceeding to collect it on the basis of almost nothing. So he seems to have become aware. This solicitor was in a hotel in Offaly, in a pub in Offaly, and followed him into the pub, assaulted him and demanded money when obviously nobody's going around carrying big wedges of cash, and instead took the solicitor's Porsche and left the scene in the Porsche. So that I think was...
That's pretty crazy. It sounds like something off the TV. And where's the Porsche?
Well, the Porsche is, as far as we know, it hasn't been recovered. There was a sort of obviously Patrick Irwin has not been in his base in Sligo, so he seems to be moving around in between houses. So
possibly gone up north.
But I mean, this is Patrick Irwin, of course, was always a violent criminal, and one of the things he was convicted of was he was involved in a vicious attack on a guard at a traffic stop, something very, just a random violent attack. And I mean, that was part of the Irwin gang were ruled through a lot of fear. They were one of the first rural gangs, but they also brought a degree of violence, I suppose. I mean, traditionally there was drug dealers in rural Ireland, but they tended to be selling hash to people who wanted to buy it, and there wasn't that kind of the gun crime and violence associated with that sort of rural dealing, and they really stepped it up in that way.
Do you know what I always noticed about the Irwins? And I mean, it's been a long time now, maybe since I have been properly looking at them, but there was a kind of chaos to them, this sort of chaotic existence. They always remained where they started from. They never, despite the fact that we were once calling them a drug cartel and they were Sligo's biggest gang, and they had hopes and ambitions, I suppose, for great wealth. They never seemed to totally accumulate or keep it. So they were always the brother Tommy, who was particularly chaotic, and I think he passed away sadly in recent years, but he was really, I mean, there was one point he was up on the roof of the house, the family home, which was a council home. The house was at the back of it, there was this kind of like bar built where they used to, certainly Tommy, I think, had become quite paranoid, along with Hughie, the older brother. When he returned from Lanzarote, he returned and kind of bedded into that house and never left it. He was constantly afraid he was going to get shot up or he was going to be attacked. But there was a kind of a sense about them that you'd hear these stories and, a lot of them you couldn't nearly write about. I mean, there was certainly an incident recently we did write about where one of them at a family wedding swung from a chandelier in a hotel. But Patrick himself was... he was kind of known as the sort of king scum of the Northwest when he went to jail. He was only 29 when he did, but he was a womanizer, and he at one point had built this house in Dromahare where which was eventually taken by the Criminal Assets Bureau and sold. It was an absolutely beautiful house. He had spent 450,000 on it. He hadn't in a million years hid the fact that he owned it. I think he had put a girlfriend at the time into living in it. The Criminal Assets Bureau, it was kind of an easy pickings nearly for them, because the Irwins sort of felt they could get away with, they weren't organised or something.
No,
they weren't kind of clever enough maybe to hide their money, to hide their wealth. That house, while it cost 450,000 to build, I think by the time it was sold for about 90 or 100,000, because it wasn't worth what had been put into it, where it was. And I remember going down at one point, and the Criminal Assets Bureau had got the order, the court order that it was theirs and they were going to sell it, and they had given Irwin a certain amount of time to move out. I think actually he was in jail and some associates of his had gone in to take his belongings, his goods and chattels, and they had obviously taken more than that. They had removed the kitchen units, they had taken the plumbing with them, they had literally stripped the place bare. The kitchens wouldn't have been worth anything. They were fitted. They would have only, worked in this particular shape of a kitchen, but still he wanted to. It's that kind of sort of, anarchy almost against policing and probably the system.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably unsophisticated criminality, really, and it was probably something equivalent to what the, in terms of that lack of sophistication that you saw with the Dundon McCarthy gang at times in Limerick at a similar point. These guys were kings of their own castle, and they really ruled through a kind of fear and intimidation. And it wasn't as sophisticated. They weren't necessarily trying to keep a low profile all the time. They obviously had an explosion of money though at some point. Even if you're talking about those assets, these people were living, very, very extravagant lifestyles just in terms of normal day-to-day spending. So he still accumulated quite a lot of wealth, but there wasn't the sophistication that you see from other criminals.
They didn't have that money laundering proper operation set up. There was a couple of kind of people that got caught up though in the Irwins world that should naturally have been involved in criminality. I mean, there was one particular girl, Deirdre Moore, the daughter from recall of a doctor who had a relationship with Irwin.
Yeah, I mean, partly he obviously had been written about in the Sunday World for a good few years at that point, but in some ways, Deirdre Moore pushed him into the other newspapers, really.
Yeah.
Because he obviously was in a long-term relationship with another woman, and he had another girlfriend, as she described herself, Deirdre Moore, who... So
she was the second girlfriend, like?
Yes. So she was...
and knew about the other one?
Well, I mean, who knows what people knew, but there seems to have been a kind of an overlap, let's put it that way. Now, Deirdre Moore was a very, very, privileged girl, very respectable family, highly respectable, very attractive looking, but she seems to have been sucked in by, I suppose, she's not the first or the last to be sucked in by the kind of the glamorous side of these things.
He wasn't a bad looking fella.
Was it
Patrick Irwin? I don't know what he's like nowadays.
But look for him on Facebook and see. But I mean, so she was sent to Dublin to collect a handgun. She subsequently, as far as I recall, said she didn't know what she was collecting, but she knew she was collecting something that was likely to be, used for something to do with his illegal business. However, it was a handgun that she collected from one of those gangland contacts in Dublin, basically from that Blanchardstown area. She was caught. She received a lengthy prison sentence, and it became a kind of maybe she became a symbol of how, or an example of how people can get sucked into this with devastating consequences.
Yeah.
Obviously for her own life. Now in the aftermath of it all, after she was released, she did speak very strong, quite powerfully, I suppose, about the mistake she'd made and how she had moved on. And by all accounts, she really did move on and put that life behind her and became involved in a fashion business, as far as I know.
Yeah, she thinks she was doing that behind bars. She learned how to make dresses and stuff, and when she came out, she used her time.
She used her time and put it past her. But it did become something that people maybe looked at and sort of saw it as, these are the people in the wake of these criminals.
Yeah.
Their lives tend to be ruined as well.
I just noticed there a piece I had written around the time that he was jailed, which would have been in 2011, and he got 7 years after being caught with 70,000 of cocaine at the time, and it was only weeks after. And I have one of 3 devoted girlfriends, so there wasn't just 2 of them. You stand corrected there.
Okay, well, it's sometimes hard to keep up.
3 women.
Yeah.
And she was jailed for gun running for him. Now, she was only 26 at the time, and she got the 5-year sentence, and that was for attempting to transport a gun between murdered gangster Eamon the Don Dunn and her boyfriend's gang. Yes, you're right. She did say in court that she didn't know what it was she had, but it was in the footwell of the car when she was stopped. And I think her and others around the Irwin crew were under surveillance at the time. She wasn't to know. Now, Irwin's sentence at that point was a huge coup for the Gardaí in the Northwest, because he had and all of the Irwins had sort of given them the 2 fingers for years. He'd been public enemy number 1 at that stage for a decade and had been, selling heroin and cocaine around the region. So he'd earlier been caught in 2006 with 67,000 worth of cocaine in Roscommon after a surveillance operation had been set up on him. And he was about to do the drugs transaction in an area called Doon when the officer swooped in and caught him in the passenger seat of a Mercedes car with 55,000 in cash and 962 grams of cocaine. Is there a suggestion? I mean, we're going back to 2006 then, and we know that previous to that, they were in the business from really the turn of the century. Is there a suggestion that he's still, forging some sort of a career for himself in the drugs business?
Well, he's obviously not averse to misbehaving if he's taking people's Porsches, but, really what happened was, as he went to prison, there was the rise of this other regional gang, as I spoke about, but they became maybe far more significant than the Irwins ever could be. Although they had a Sligo base, they really became a much more professional outfit. And that gang from Sligo were also being linked to the murder of, for example, Robbie Lawler. So the role that they played, it seems to be, that's obviously there's people on trial in the north, very complicated murder, but that Sligo gang have become one of the major regional suppliers maybe throughout the country and in parts of Leinster, parts of Connacht. And they maybe became a more sophisticated operation than the Irwins, who are really strutting their stuff around Sligo and some of the Irwin gang would have been involved in beating up drug addicts for small amounts of money. So you see, probably they were replaced by something that the Irwins lacked, which is a kind of a more, something with a longer term strategy. And that's the increasing complexity of gangland really in Ireland, isn't it? That when when some of these guys get replaced, and you saw it in Limerick when the Dundon brothers ended up behind prison, you had the rise of some of the McCarthy faction that were a lot more, money orientated, a lot more desirant of a lower profile, and certainly a more professional gangland outfit.
What colour's the Porsche? Do we know?
I don't know, Nicola. Any colour, any colours, any colour's okay when you have a Porsche.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Think so. I think so. I have to say, I do think though, if you're going to bother, going to the bother of buying one, a red one really would have to be the.
Look, you can, as soon as.
Anyway, a solicitor who can afford a Porsche, good luck to him. Look, and hopefully that case are the guards investigating? Has there been a complaint made in the case? Do we know? Or
it's certainly being investigated by the guards. I'm not aware of, but
who's given a statement or whatever. Yeah,
but I mean, it is. Yeah, it's
now. Look, it's a bit unusual for a member of the legal profession to be targeted by criminals, but not totally unusual. And I think, when that happens, and along with guards as well, the cases, people working within sort of the world of criminality, be you a Garda, a lawyer, a judge, whatever, maybe a journalist, ambulance services, etc. There's this kind of you like to see if somebody lashes out and attacks, or in any way, you like to see them sentenced and a kind of an example to be made, because you have to work with this and you don't want to be seen as an easy target. Now, unfortunately, there was a case recently which has angered the guards, and I think the GRA have come out and condemned it. A criminal by the name of Gavin Quinn who savagely attacked a Garda, Alan Murphy, who I noticed was given a medal for his bravery, a special commemorative medal recently, and is still a guard, because a lot of people who are subjected to these kind of attacks just will never work again, really. So he has to be admired for that. But Gavin Quinn and his brother Lee Quinn were, just tell us about it, and also just to point out that how long Gavin Quinn spent in jail, which is just...
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the attacks on professionals, see, we've seen this in other countries. People might think, and they have a justifiable thing to say, that an attack on anybody should never be treated differently. Anybody who's a victim, it should all be the same. But you have seen in other countries, and for example, and that's featured on Crime World a lot in say in Holland, where attacks on police, judiciary, solicitors have just become commonplace. So the state, whatever way you look at it, the state can't tolerate that, or nor should it tolerate attacks on the basic foundation, because it's really an attack on an attempt to undermine the ability of the justice system to function. So, I mean, I think that's why there was justifiable anger at what happened with Gavin Quinn, because, he walked free basically 45 days after his final sentence. Now, he served some of that sentence was backdated to when he went into custody. But the original attack was deemed so serious that he was initially charged, and his brother were charged with attempted murder. Now, that wasn't followed through. That was eventually downgraded by the DPP to an assault charge. So but it was initially...
So what happened was Garda Alan Murphy went to the scene of what he thought was an attack on somebody else.
Yeah.
In uniform or out of it, whatever it was, he was there as a member of the Garda Síochána to protect another member of the public.
Which is actually initially to attack, the Quinns were in dispute with somebody else, and he initially came with the idea of defending the Quinns.
Right.
Yeah.
The two brothers, Gavin and Lee Quinn. So he's there, and he arrives in the course of his job, and he is attacked, and so savagely. I have to say, I think the details of this are just horrendous. He says, pinned to the ground by Gavin Quinn, while Lee Quinn jumped on him and stabbed him. First tried to stab him through the torso, the abdomen, but he had a stab vest on him. He could feel the knife in that. So then when he couldn't get him there, he decided to go at his face, and he tried to stab him through the eye. Yeah.
It's horrific, And
he did stab him because in his victim impact statement, he describes how, he thinks of this what happened to him every day. He thought he was going to die. It was only members of the fire brigade, the Dublin Fire Brigade, came to his aid. They had obviously were also at the scene, and they saved him, he says. And he actually said in his victim impact statement, "I can still feel the twist of the blade as it was torn from my head."
Yeah, so I mean, these are, lifelong trauma that these things cause. I mean, there's just no getting around it. And when you see, that Gardaí are obviously putting themselves on the line, as many other people do in terms of, ambulance workers and all of that, but there can't be too much tolerance for it. Neither Lee Quinn nor Gavin Quinn could be, by any definition, described as, this couldn't be described as the perfect criminal records. Both of them have significant criminal records, and Gavin Quinn, would have had, it wouldn't have been the first time he'd been in the papers. He would have been well known. He would have associated with what would broadly he would have been described as one of the young Fat Freddy gang members. These people have been before the courts repeatedly for violent attacks. So to get a 2.5-year sentence for something like that does seem genuinely quite shocking. Lee Quinn obviously got a longer sentence, 7 years, because he was viewed as obviously the person who
carried out the stabbing.
However, there's no debate about the fact that it was, that the two of them were working together in terms of restraining the guard. Obviously, because Gavin Quinn didn't have the knife, he got a lesser sentence.
And Gavin Quinn claimed that he had drank a bottle of whiskey and had taken 2 grams of coke, that he didn't remember the details of it, but he was able to say that he didn't disable the Garda Alan Murphy. He doesn't remember what happened, but he was also claiming that he didn't hold him down. So, I mean, I think that's what was said to the court. Just to explain, so they were first of all going to be charged with attempted murder, which would carry a life sentence.
Or which could carry a life sentence.
Yeah. Of course, it's not mandatory, but it could carry up to that. But in the background of all these criminal cases that come before the courts is the Director of Public Prosecutions. And it is the Director of Public Prosecutions that makes the decisions on what charges are brought or not brought. The Gardaí carry out their own investigations and they send what's called a file to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the DPP then decides, is there enough evidence here to go forward in trial or whatever. But the two Quinns sort of went to the DPP with essentially what is a bit of an American phrase, but a plea bargain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose that like any charge, obviously the attempted murder was brought there, but, there has to be... I suppose if somebody is tried for something like that and they're found not guilty, they walk free. Where a lesser charge, obviously the Quinn brothers ultimately pled guilty to a lesser charge. Yeah. And the state may judge that something cannot be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law, or there's a risk that it won't be, and then somebody may not face any sanction at all. So that's the
thinking behind it. And there's lots of things weighed up as well. I think also just even, look, even the cost of a trial, how long it'll go on for, etc., etc. All of that kind of comes into the DPP's decision making. Yeah. And we're not condemning the decision in any way. We're just sort of explaining how an attempted murder charge reduces to assault and how somebody gets away with 2.5 years instead of a possible life sentence.
Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time. People are, maybe charged with something. You see cases, there was a case recently, somebody charged with murder, and that was downgraded ultimately to manslaughter, where they would plead guilty and it'd be accepted that, the DPP make a decision on the charge, but the judge then makes a decision on the sentence. There's guidelines for judges as well. They can't, go beyond those sentencing guidelines, but, the DPP don't necessarily know what the sentence will be.
And of course the sentence was backdated to when Gavin Quinn in particular first went into jail. So he had already served 2 years by the time he was sentenced. 45 days later, he walks out of the prison and puts a photograph up on social media of him being greeted by a female associate.
Yeah, so I mean, he gets a hero's welcome as he walks out to the loving arms of his associates. then there is. I mean, the
And where did that go up on social media?
that went up on a female associates pages. So I mean,
Was that a brazen kind of two fingers?
well, I mean, I think it's so. What happened was the story broke, and the GRA, often don't comment on these things, but they did put out, some comments on this, and then what happens is, of course, is that the stories go up. You can look through comments yourselves, but you see there is a sort of a backlash from his associates saying he did his time, and all of that sort of stuff. So it's not people that, it's a funny thing where people are not maybe ashamed of that association, that they're defending him. And
at the heart of it really is this Garda Murphy, who I just think he's taken an amazing attitude to it. He says he's not a victim.
Yeah.
And he wants to go forward and continue to do his job. I mean, I think that's amazing. He hasn't been intimidated out of what is his passion, to be a guard, to serve the community, despite this horrendous attack happening on him.
Yeah, and I mean, it is admirable. As you say, there's many people have backed away from that job when these things happen, and that's no judgment on them. But, I think there is, it's I suppose it's all a little parable for policing in modern life, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do we treat people that launch these attacks, and are we really looking at it in the longer term? Because there can't be like we have. Obviously, we talked about Holland, but there's even more, and this is not to compare the Quinn brothers to this, but if you see in places like Mexico and other countries there where the state have really, where
lost control.
They've lost control. And as simple as that. And to see it almost happen in Holland, and that's said by the Dutch officials themselves, where you become at risk of running a narco state.
Yes.
And that has been said by the Dutch politicians.
And that it's been said a number of times, and it's the first country in Europe really where we have seen that the murder of a criminal lawyer who was working with a state witness, the murder of a journalist who was also sort of working with a state witness who was to give evidence against a particular individual. And there, for a period of time, the Prime Minister under 24-hour security.
Yeah.
Like, it's scary how quick that can happen and how one individual can tip that balance. And then all of a sudden you have this sort of baying community, I suppose, of gangland criminals who are just more than willing to go out on the attack. And that's really why I think messages have to be sent that this is just not acceptable. And unfortunately, in the case of Quinn, for all the various reasons we've discussed, that message wasn't sent.
No, I don't think so. And I mean, look, it's not to say Gavin Quinn is responsible for turning Ireland into a narco state. He clearly isn't personally, but there has to be maybe a look at how how if sentencing is not the sole thing that's going to stop, but there are in many other countries particular differences in sentencing for people who attack the arms of the justice system,
Okay, well,
hope you're not too depressed now at the end of all that, are you?
I'm really cheery now. That's really kind of brought me back to
remembering your good old days, doorstepping people in.
I know.
Houses in Sligo and stuff.
Yeah, back then. But so look, there's a lot going on. There's a lot coming up over the next couple of months. Not only are we possibly heading to the ploughing championships for a live show. I have my own show on the 20th of September in Liberty Hall.
Touch your doggy to the ploughing.
Yeah. And what do we talk about at the ploughing? We're going to have to talk about rural crime and criminals.
We will.
What'll we talk about? We'll just waffle on.
It'll be interesting.
It'll be very, very interesting. That's a live show on the 21st at the ploughing. But also we have some really meaty trials and stuff coming up over the next couple of months, and we're going to be really busy. So I suppose, welcome back yourself.
Thank you very much, Nicola.
Yeah. You've been listening to Crime World, a podcast from SundayWorld.com, produced by Ian Mullaney and edited by me, Nicola Tallant. Research assistant is Claude Amini. If you like this show and love true crime, leave us a review, or why not download the free SundayWorld.com app for lots more stories from Ireland and across the globe.